So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, for joining us. This is our first panel discussion during the ADIF Summer Virtual Festival, which we are holding this July 26th. And we are about today to discuss the current state of African cinema. And we have two guests with us, Dr. Bukari Sawadogo, who is Assistant Professor of Black Studies and Cinema Studies at the City College of New York, and author of Les Cinémas Francophones Ouest Africains, 1900-2005, and Dr. Reynaldo Barroso Spesh, ADIF co-director and co-founder of the African Diaspora International Film Festival. So we have 3 African films in the festival. We have Shehu Umar by Adama Alilu, De Pirogue by Moussa Touré, and 2 Weeks in Lagos by Catherine Fasega. And the discussion will be around these films and the current state of African cinema. So Reynaldo, Dr. Spesh, this is yours.
Well, thank you everybody for paying attention to this moment in the history of the festival. I think it's appropriate to talk a little bit about the festival. The African Diaspora International Film Festival was started in New York City in 1993. It later continued in other cities, in Wilmstad, Curacao in the Caribbean, Geneva in Switzerland, Paris in France, Jersey City, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., and Chicago, Illinois. ADIF is today held in New York City, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Paris, France, during different moments of the year. The festival has an editorial line that includes films from Africa and the African diaspora, as well as films that depict stories of people of color that are relevant to our understanding of other human experiences. The festival is then an event that aims at showing films about the human experience of people of color. The presentation of African films is a fundamental component of the festival. Today, we will attempt to talk about films in Africa and the world from the perspective of 3 films that appear, as my partner mentioned, in the program. One is from Senegal, the other one from Nigeria, and the last 3, 2 Weeks in Lagos.
There are 2
both
from Nigeria.
From Nigeria, yes.
And 2 are from Nigeria, Shehu Umar and
2 Weeks in Lagos.
Mm-hmm. The importance of these films for us is fundamental because Nigeria is kind of a newcomer in the scenario of African cinema, and Senegal is well known by the work of Ousmane Sembène, but we have the impression that other filmmakers like Moussa Touré, the director of La Pirogue, De Pirogue, are not very well known. I must say that when we began in 1993, South Africa and Egypt were important producers of African cinema. Today, that's not the case. So Professor Sawadogo, what can you say about the development of African films today? Are there any new countries in Africa with an important production?
Okay, thank you for having me. And before I answer your question, I want to, recognize your festival and also say how important it is within the span of last year and this year, because not many people may know it, but last year was the 400th anniversary of the start of slavery. And for Africa, 2020 is the 60th anniversary of most African countries getting the political independence. And also, if you look at the UN, it's 75th birthday. So for that, I think that it's high time really to talk about the African presence and the African cultural production, either on the continent and also in the diaspora. So to come back to your question, I will say that, we have more countries beyond, you mentioned South Africa and also Egypt when you started. Those are the 2 really I don't say pioneer, but pillars of African film industry. Today you have more. Obviously, you have Senegal, which okay, and also I would say you have also Niger, which is one of the pioneering country in terms of African film, cinema. But more and more, you have Burkina Faso. But more and more, you have more countries. We can take the case of Nigeria. We can take the case of Ghana. We can take the case of DRC, Angola, even Rwanda. So we have, right now a kind of convergence of not only the technology opening up new ways for African filmmakers to come into the fold, but also we have the countries, some countries, I can take the case of Senegal, many countries who have that have created film development fund. That's the case of Senegal with FOPICA. That's the case of Burkina Faso with the Film and Tourism Fund. You have also the film fund created by Ghana 3 years ago. And to say that, okay, you have a kind of renewal of African cinema, I would say more we are kind of transitional period, but we have more time to talk about it.
Yeah, now that when you mentioned nature, I remember a film like Kabas Kabo by Umar Oganda, and this is a film that I had the pleasure of watching many years ago. Talking about the development as in our capacity as festival directors, we have realized the importance of festivals to promote and expose the cinematic work of people all over the world. And I would like you to say a few words about two of the festivals that we know kind of well. I'm talking about FESPACO in Burkina Faso and Durban in South Africa. As I see that those two festivals, the fact that Burkina Faso is a country that began a very important film industry thanks to the work of um, uh, Thomas Sankara and his motivation to give to the new country. The former Opel Volta became Burkina Faso, and that was a new cultural perspective. And he thought that films could be important to promote that. And the particular case of South Africa, that what I have experienced has a two moments in the production of films, during the years of apartheid and then after that period when apartheid ended, and there was an arrival of Black South Africans behind the camera and in other capacities. Before, that was not the case. So now, this is 2020. FESPACO took place, I think, last year. Durban happened last year. So Durban is about to happen again. So what are those festivals? And maybe others that you know, I know there are festivals in Zanzibar. I know there are festivals in Nigeria. I think there are more than one in Nigeria. What do you think those festivals have been able to do to favor the promotion and development of African cinema?
Yeah. So okay, I'm going, to speak, in a broader sense for whoever is listening who may not be very familiar with African cinema. So we have the two major African film festival. One is FESPACO, which is 1969, created in 1969, and Carthage Film Festival, 1968. Those are really the two big giants in the landscape of African film festival world. And then you have other festivals like the Durban, like the Zanzibar, or Écran Noir in Cameroon, or even the Blida Film Festival, or Nigeria also. So we have those film festivals. So what's those film festivals has allowed? You mentioned earlier the case of Burkina Faso. It's first we have to remember what is the function of cinema. Cinema can have many functions. It can be entertainment. It can be educational. It can be a film just as a weapon. So in that case, the birth of FESPACO was really premised on a group of Burkinabe wanting at the time after Volta wanting to have access to African films. And then that grew into something bigger. So, so the essence is, give African access to their own cultural productions. So that FESPACO, and I think that has been also the leitmotif and the function of many festivals, which is exhibition of films, have those films into spaces where people for whom they're made, and also people for whom their culture is the primary material of those films, so that they will be able to access those films. It's true that also, in talking about festival, you have other component, which is the market. And FESPACO, you have on the sideline of FESPACO, always you have the Mika, which is the film market. So for me, is as of now, the festivals are really, I would say, booming. And the question that obviously get asked very often is, are they, innovating, or are they just replicating on the old model of exhibition and, discussion, and maybe, market, film market on the side? So that's, and also will they go online, online instead of just, the physical, the physical screening? Will they go online? Will they tap into the potential of the new technologies?
No, I think you will correct me if I'm wrong on that. That the work done by those festivals and other festivals in Africa was some sort of a motivation for major film festivals in the Western world to showcase African cinema. Uh, we have been going to Berlinale, we have been going to the Toronto International Film Festival, to the Cannes Film Festival, when it was around the Montreal World Film Festival. Those are major events. And there was a moment when we began to be exposed to African cinema in those major events. And that was, to a certain extent, for us, Black people, people involved in cinema, that was a very important moment, because we realized then that the universalization of the arts of cinema coming from Africa was a fact. Can you say something about those festivals that are now more frequently showcasing African cinema? For example, the Piroga, which is part of the program, is it's a film that we had the immense pleasure of watching while we were attending the Cannes Film Festival. And Musa Touré was there talking to an incredible crowd. And all the other, Suleiman Sisse and all the filmmakers that we have met over there and in other moments. Can you say a little bit about the internationalization of African cinema, particularly when it comes to this part of the world? I forgot to mention the United States, but I will do that.
Okay. Yeah, because one of the challenge for African cinema, initially has been the production. Basically, where do we get the funds and the equipment to make films? Now that is kind of being taken care of. The other challenge, which has always been there, but now it's more prominent, is distribution, and that's where festival comes in. The festival come in, and particularly festivals that are not on the continent, festivals that are outside of the continent, like the case of the case of the US, and you have your own film festival, the African Diaspora International Film Festival and other festival in the US, but also you talk about like Vue d'Afrique, or even in Europe. What those film festivals has allowed is for African cinema to have a voice, to have a presence, and to be a conduit through which not only the Black diaspora, the diaspora will get access to the images, but also to promote African cinema beyond the continent. Because if you take what are the channels of distribution of African cinema, beyond the outside of the continent, you have the festivals. And second, you have the academic market, whether it's being academics inviting filmmakers, or is it distributors like Amazon, producing DVDs and selling it. So those are the two, as of now, those are the two really, I don't want to say primary, because they used to be primary and then you have no, streaming. But festival remain one of the mode of interaction where it's not only the viewer with the screen, but also the viewer with the filmmaker with a live interaction. In that sense, the festivals plays a key role of linkage and promotion of African cinema.
Now, when we move further into festivals, into film production, we as curators of an event and also as distributors found an evolution in topics. What are we saying? For example, last year we remember well during the festival we showcased Dalignaro, a film from Djibouti, a place that we didn't know much about, a place that did not have or does not have an important production of films. We showed 2 Weeks in Lagos, which is a film that we can call a comedy of sorts. And we also had a film, a very powerful film, Kinshasa Makambo, which is about the struggle of a group of youngsters or the movement against the re-election of Joseph Kabila Fils. But there is one thing that I must say that when we began in 1993, we realized that colonialism and the struggle against colonialism were topics that were front and center in the production of African cinema. We have seen with time that there is a generation of filmmakers who are producing films who have other concerns and preoccupations. And through their work, they are showing a more diverse Africa. They are showing an Africa that is concerned with the values of democracy and the sustain of environment and things of that nature. Can you tell us, I mean, we cannot deny that that type of cinema, that body of work has exposed us to a richer Africa to a certain extent. But is that a trend? Can we say that now, for example, films like, in the particular case of Nigeria, films come like 2 Weeks in Lagos are kind of the norm? Can we say that if we compare films coming out of Nigeria and films coming out of Burkina Faso, we had a film from Burkina Faso about bureaucracy and corruption and all that, that had at the center the political issue, but it's post-colonial situation. What are the trends that you see today in African cinema, please?
Yeah, because while you were talking, mentally I was, making the the link between Osan. Yeah, I don't, you know that movie. So Osan to Atlantics.
Okay.
Material. You see how really that far range were. Talk about Osan, you talk about, the 1960, 68 to really, well, last year. So we see that range where you have a cinema tradition, I would say cinematic traditions in Africa. You have on one hand the more auteur cinema, some auteur cinema, and which has a more really, I would say, substantial, substance, not that the others don't have, but more a political connotation sometimes. And then, and that tradition is still continuing. That tradition is still continuing with more auteur cinema. And since the 1990s, let's say, with the release of, Living in Bondage, 1992, the Nigerian cinema, the Nigerian movie, so which marked the birth of Nollywood, we've seen a proliferation of trends coming of African cinema, where it's not only because, let me stay there and say because I always said don't always equate Nollywood with with Nigerian cinema, because Nigerian cinema existed well before, because if you take the case of Ola Balogun.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's almost in the same vein, like the other, also francophone filmmakers. In that sense, you have the more auteur, a little bit, political conscious cinema, and that trend is continuing. It's going today. You mentioned the case of young filmmakers taking on bureaucracy, taking on the need to press for more accountability from the governing bodies. That is continuing, but also what is also developing, it's a more commercial popular cinema. And yes, and on that part is where it comes interesting, is we talk about genre, because prior to that, when you think of African cinema, it's never defined in terms of genre. It's not about a Western. It's not about comedy. It's not about a thriller, sci-fi. No, but you see more and more, the genre debate coming, because you see that trend of popular commercial, cinema. If you take the case of Atlantics, many people will ask, okay, is it a sci-fi? Is it a zombie movie? Is it a thriller? Is it? So that's and for the 2 weeks in Lagos, it's a comedy with a lot of twists, and we are happy ending, like all comedy. So, and we see that also picking up. That's on the film side. On the other side, also, that's where some people talk about not film studies, but more like screen media, film. Someone's like, let's talk about screen media, because you have a third leg which start developing the late 1990s, early 2000, which is the emergence of TV serials. That's also a huge development, to the point that it outpaced the production of features and documentaries. That also to sum up, we still have the political conscious auteur filmmaking. We have now more and more also the more commercial popular cinema, and the third is the production and distribution of series.
Well, that's quite a jump compared to the beginnings. Now, when we talk, for example, in our position as distributors, we thought that speaking about the acceptance of African cinema, this part of the world, I'm talking about the Americas, was going to be a very fertile ground, because maybe almost 16 million of people who came forcefully from Africa to this part of the world, their descendants, we thought, were very much interested in watching images coming out of Africa. I could not say that distribution is an easy task. I could not say that when we come to the Americas was an empty place that needed to be filled up with African cinema. That's not the case. But sometimes I'm still, every time I have an opportunity, every time we have an opportunity, we like to know what is the perception of those who are in the business of showing African images, talking to African filmmakers, talking to African distributors. What is the perception they have of the development of African cinema when we come to the Americas? When I'm talking about Latin America, the Caribbean, Canada, the United States, the Americas, where there are a sizable population of African descent. What can you say? What can you say about that situation, about those audiences and their reaction in those areas to African films? What is your perception?
My perception is that, okay, maybe I'm a little bit biased because I'm more, the academic world. Okay, in my classes are always over-tallied. Always over-tallied. My classes of African cinema are always over-tallied. To say that, okay, in terms of a student population, there is a genuine and sustained interest in African cinema, and it's a diverse student body. So you see second generation immigrant, you see the first generation immigrant, you see people who have no African ancestry. So on the campus, I would say yeah, the interest is there. Outside of campus and everyday life, that's that's a completely different story. Why? Because first, in terms of distribution, except the cases of festivals like yours, who that bring films to the community the diaspora community of African American in general, it's very, very difficult for them to be exposed, or we're usually not exposed, except that now with Nollywood being, I would say, almost in every hairdressing salon, or in almost in many places, they get some exposure. But now there is a difference between being exposed and being receptive. And that's where I think that, and that's where I think the challenge lies. I don't have any data to back it up, but you may simply see, encounter audience that are simply not receptive. Why? I think that they have more reason. I cannot speak for them, because they may say, I simply don't want to watch a subtitled movie. It could be that, or simply I'm not interested in this kind of story. So for me is if we can get more exposure, because as of now it's either every person just stumbling on or getting online to watch an African film if they're interested, or if they heard about it, that first, and then we have the festivals, and then we have the academic world. But all those put together in terms of percentage, it's a really, really a drop in the bucket when you look at the potential market that, take the case of the US, that the US represent.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, that there is some sort of awareness that the films are there, that the film exists, but how receptive we are to those films is still complicated. Mm-hmm. What for me is tremendously complicated to understand is the fact that in the United States, they are the infrastructure. So distributing or exposing people to African films is relatively easier. I mean, we began in 1993, and as we said at the beginning, we have festivals in New York City, we have festivals in Chicago, we have festivals in Washington, D.C. At the moment, we had a festival in Jersey City. So, and those festivals existed and exist because there was a community interested in coming to see the films. My shock is when I go, for example, to Latin America, and in Latin America, there are communities of African descent. And the festivals there remain very distant from African cinema. There are countries in which when you tell an Afro-Uruguayan person that there are films made in Africa, the person is completely surprised. I mean, they don't believe that Africans make film. The image of Africa is very complicated for them. In the Caribbean, there are a couple of film festivals around, and we have been trying to increase the awareness of the existence of some of the African films that we distribute. It is also very complicated to find receptivity to African cinema. We do not know why in those places, I mean, to be honest, in those places where we assume there is a natural audience, the motivation to showcase those films there is not more palpable. Mm-hmm. At the moment we discuss, and we were recently discussing again, the importance of film critics, and perhaps if film critics were more exposed to those countries in any possible way, maybe the fact of reading about an African film would piqued the interest in those countries. We found out, for example, that an old friend of ours, Clement Tepsoba, who was
Burkina Faso, Clement
from
Tepsoba.
Burkina critics. I mean, he created the Association of Critics of Cinema of Burkina Faso, and he was an old friend. Every time we were there, every time we were in Milano, Italy for the festival, we bumped into each other, and we had long conversations. He recently passed, and his criticism was very helpful because I think, and I am going to put this out there, that there is European film criticism and there is African film criticism. One of the things I realized, a film festival director, and he was not very convinced that there was African comedies. And I said, well, Africans can, I mean, African can laugh like
We laugh
everybody
too.
else.
Yes.
But I mean, maybe they do not laugh the way we do because we tend to laugh at them. And this is a different process because Africans laugh with all together, with us. We all laugh.
Yeah.
And I said, maybe this man is more connected with some African criticism. He would be more sensitive to the nuances, the variations. I mean, many of these Manson films have very hilarious moments, and the film is very serious, and you see those moments in which you say, wow, this is crazy. So it is a way of approaching cinema with a different kind of seriousness.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? But anyway, you are the one talking, please.
Yeah, yes, but because when you're talking, I was, the camera, just went off because I was trying to pull off my latest book. Then when you mentioned comedy, because that's why I brought me to write this book, and it came out last year, West African Screen Media Comedy TV Series and Transnationalization, because there is no prior to this there is no book on African comedy, as if comedy. Comedies don't exist in Africa, as if it wasn't, there isn't any tradition of, comedy filmmaking. There is. So, the point you're making, it's, correct, because for me, I will tie it into the larger conversation of the promotion of films, which is, it may be, criticism that I'm leveling at the filmmakers, African filmmakers, but I always say your job when you finish making your movie is where your job just starts there. It's when you complete, your movie, it's released. Nah, this is not the time for you, to take a back seat, and, the rest will take care of itself. And part of it, the promotion, sure, you have, submitting your films to festivals, but also one key component that sometimes get overlooked, that's where I'm coming with the criticism, is really to have your film reviewed. And by, it could be critics or it could be, journalists, because usually, whether, for better or for worse, what usually stays in, the written record are who has written about this movie when it came out. And also that's, in terms of archives, but also in the moment, most people, might be, if they are on the fence about going to see the movie, if they read about it, either, from whatever outlet they get the news from, but it was mostly like, to be a deciding factor for them to go yes or no. And that part, I think, that part is sometimes overlooked by, I'm saying, filmmakers, because I'm thinking of African filmmakers, because they wound up being the one-man orchestra doing everything at the same time, promoting. But during the promotional efforts, sometimes that's just left out is, you have, film reviews, written about your work. The other part is, yes, write about it, I don't want to say, okay, I don't want to make the argument that non-Africans cannot write good critiques about African films. No, I certainly don't want to make that argument. But what I would like to make is, the point I would like to make is, if we have more African voices in the landscape or in the environment, in the ecosystem of film criticism, that will help a lot. Because even I will even push it a little bit further from from criticism to didactic resources. Because if we are if you look at the film teaching or learning materials, how many do we find on African cinema? I'm not talking about scholarly books. I'm not talking about scholarly books. I'm talking about books that any a student or any non-specialist can pick up and learn. That's it still that's still connected to criticism, and that's because it should be part of a conversation.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think I want to close with the films, the African films we have in the program.
Yeah.
We have, as we said at the beginning, 3 films. 2 are from Nigeria. There's one that is a restored version of an old film. I could call it a classic, Shehu Umar. One of those films, pre-Nollywood, if we can use that terminology.
Yes.
We already said a couple of things about 2 Weeks in Lagos and La Pirogue that I mentioned when we watched it for the first time. But I think La Pirogue deserves a little bit of attention because Moussa Touré was able to make a film, I think, in the vein of cinema that Ousmane Sembène did so well, of looking at Africa, watching the incredible, beautiful things and positive things in Africa, but also having the critical eye that allows him as an African and to see some of the problems. One problem is that of immigration, young bodies who have to leave with the belief that in Europe particularly, sometimes in North America, they would find a better life. We are talking about men and women who, after the access to independence, after 60 years of the end of colonialism, still think that the European El Dorado is where they should go to. What can you say about these 3 films to close this conversation?
Before you answer, Dr. Sawadogo, I just want to acknowledge Jane Colbreth, who wrote, "I'm delighted to have the opportunity to see these films from my home in a semi-rural town of Foothills in Northern California. We continue to be spreading the word to friends and contact on Facebook." So thank you so much, Jane. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And now I'll let Dr. Feel free to post Q&As if you have questions to Dr. Sawadogo or Dr. Barroso-Spesh. We still have a few, like 10 minutes to go. So feel free to ask your questions. And now I'll let you answer, Dr. Sawadogo.
Okay, concerning the film La Pirogue, the Pirogue by Moussa Touré, I will say that in terms of, it's true that in terms of cinematic tradition, it really, I would say, pick on and push forward what Sembène has been doing for quite successfully for many years. But also in terms of thematic, it's really contemporary, of contemporary relevance. The theme of migration, the young and able bodies that leave Africa in thousands, and also thousands who die in the Atlantic trying to cross to the West. So the film is, the way it's filmed, we can see how it's gripping, but also we get an insight into what are the reasons, what are some of the reasons why these young men leave their homeland and try and get into a perilous journey of reaching the shores of the supposedly Western El Dorado. Because we see in during this film, some are leaving simply because of what we can call today the climate change, the consequences of climate change. Some are leaving because of the depletion of fish stock, because the fishermen, they cannot fish anymore. Some are leaving because they want to go to get medical care in Europe. So the real, it's a microcosm of the Senegalese society that gives us insight into why these young and able bodies are leaving Africa. So the film is really, it gets, the call to you. And I really like the ending of the film where we see at the end that the protagonist Bailai return with his younger brother or cousin Abu, which somehow it's very disappointing to them as characters, but also the symbolic is the Westman is not the solution. Maybe you have to return, but the reality is many don't want to return. So, and you have many who risk their lives trying to cross the Sahara into the Mediterranean to go to Europe, or cross the Atlantic to go to the Americas.
So I have another question here from Musa Montali. Please expand on the role of new technological development, the role of new technological developments, how it has affected filmmaking in Africa today.
How he has affected filmmaking is he has democratized the access to filmmaking, because prior to the year 2000, to get access to the film instrument, you have to go to a film school, and which means that most likely you have to go to outside the continent, and not many have the means to go to film schools. And also in terms of format, we're talking about 35 millimeter. All this to say that this is a very select, but with video, with digital technologies, you can get a prosumer camera and shoot your movie, edit it if you have a computer and an editing software, and put it rightly on the web. So in terms of production and distribution, he has kind of, I don't say level, but open up more possibilities for many people to come into filmmaking than it was previously possible.
Eve Ferguson is asking, how can African cinema break free of European funding for true artistic independence and authentic voice, especially in the context of what many are calling the second nadir of Pan-Africanism? It's Eve from the Library of Congress. That's a personal.
So. Yeah, yes. I think the question is touching the person is touching on a very important issue, which is the artistic sovereignty of African cinema, which is in terms of funding so far, African cinema has relied so much on institution funding and also state funding. So for African cinema, I think to give a concrete answer, an example could be just, a GoFundMe effort, just to raise money for African filmmakers to go fund in the effort to raise money, but also to do what communities of colors has been doing in the US here successfully, which is to create collectives. So if you create, collectives, you kind of pull your resources together, and you will be more competitive in terms of producing, but also distributing cinema, your films. I know there is the Federation of African Filmmakers that is trying to do something similar, But I think that, okay, at the very local level, instead of, thinking at the continental level, at the very local level, at least, to have a collectives, which, you can do it even with people in your neighborhoods and really help you harness resources.
Yeah, that makes sense. Even Captain is asking, what is your take on the showing of African cinema on Netflix? Many times it is the only chance to get to see these films.
Yeah, I think for Netflix you have two camps. With so on one hand, you have the argument that okay, Netflix, it's a global platform and it allows African cinema to reach a wider audience. And you have on one camp, the other argument is that not everybody in Africa, in African countries, have access to Netflix, because sometimes we forget as if we need to have a prerequisite, which means you have to have a reliable electricity grid system. You need to have a reliable internet connection, and all those are not always given in African countries. So sometimes, and for Netflix in Africa, for the city dwellers, this is something that they access very easily. But the reality is almost 80% to 70% of the population live in rural areas. Sometimes it, don't have access to electricity or, internet.
Mm. And that's a personal question. What is your take on Shehu Umar?
Oh, this is, I loved it because this was a completely discovery. When I saw it, I automatically thought about Brian Larkin's work. Brian Larkins is a professor at Columbia here in New York, and he did a lot of work that show how the Northern Nigerian cinema, Hausa language cinema, which is known as Kannywood, the links between Kannywood and Bollywood. And while I was watching it and I see some of the scenes, I'm like, oh, the mix, I can see some of the links. And also in terms of the content itself, I think that, okay, everybody should watch it because it touches on issues that are very sensitive that in Africa people don't talk much about, which is trans-Saharan slavery, slave trade, and also how Africans who have abducted, kidnapped other Africans, go to sell to slave traders, which is something a very touchy issue in Africa. So it touches a lot of things. I love this movie.
Okay, I have a Juan who wants to ask a question in Spanish, and then Ivan has offered to translate. So we're waiting for the process here.
Okay, yeah, we'll wait. Yeah. Okay.
So in the meantime, Ronaldo, do you have any other question for Bukari?
Well, I mean, I am glad that there's someone who asking questions in Spanish, because perhaps this person would be knowledgeable about the situation with African cinema in Latin America, where, with the only exception of Cuba, where I had the pleasure of watching the Money Order, Le Mandat, Usman Ben. And I remember talking to Usman Ben in Fespaco when I saw your film subtitled in Spanish in Cuba. He could not believe it. I have realized that with the exception of Cuba, where there is a political decision to show African cinema, I haven't seen that type of motivation or decision or determination to expose masses in Latin America to African film production. Oh. So let's see if that person is knowledgeable in the area.
Actually, it's a different type of question. They wanted to know whether there is any interest in Africa for Latin American cinema, and what films that are, have been spread in Africa coming from Latin America.
In Africa, well, I mean, this is kind of, let me say this, is kind of funny because there is Don Pedro, which is a filmmaker from Angola, who made a film about the African influence in tango, and that film was screened in FESPACO. I remember another film directed by a guy from Peru about the Afro-Peruvians, and I remember that I was in Ouagadougou that year, and he showed that film over there.
There was also the Brazilian contingent once at FESPACO.
Okay, there was once a Brazilian contingent, and there is a film that, as a matter of fact, we have in distribution, the Denying Brazil, which is about the representation of people of African descent in Brazilian and Brazilian film on television, and that film was in FESPACO as well. So FESPACO particularly have been sensitive to the Afrocentric theme in Latin American cinema. I do not know of other film festivals doing that kind of work.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no, I just wanted to say, go ahead. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. The only thing I want to say is I know that there are a lot of telenovelas, especially Brazilian telenovelas, that are being shown on African TV screens through channels and satellites. I don't know if that was the same thing you wanted to say.
No, yeah, I just wanted, to say, when it comes to telenovelas, whether it's, from Mexico, from Brazil, from Latin, in South America, African screens are inundated with, those productions. But when it comes to feature length, usually it's at festivals for FESPACO, because FESPACO has a category, and the highest prize that the award is named after Paul Robson, the Paul Robson Prize.
That's right.
Yeah, for the diaspora. So in that category, you have a lot of production, that comes in. But apart from the festival channel, in terms of distribution, you don't, see, a lot of, production from, Spanish speaking, whether it's dubbed on, apart from the TV series, no. And I think we can say the same thing for also African American productions, apart from, Nollywood, usually, in the 70s, I've been told that, they used to broadcast African American films on television, but it's something that stopped. So I think just saying, in addition to Spanish speaking, you have also African American cinema that has hard time really penetrating Africa.
I suppose in South Africa, you would have on some TV channels, satellite TV, they show European productions, and they might have Spanish films there, but it's not Latin American cinema.
No, I don't have, the names here, but I wrote about it. You have Chinese, you have Turkish, you have Indians, now TV channels in East Africa that broadcast.
Interesting.
Films. And what is interesting for the Chinese one, I can't remember the name, is that there are some of the films that dub into the local languages. So yeah.
So they have Chinese productions in the local language?
Yeah, but dub production. So to say that, I won't be surprised if this comes into being, because for the case of of Turkish TV station, the Indian and the Chinese, saying that the media market in Africa is really attracting a lot of interest. So I won't be surprised if a Spanish speaking channel on the satellite is offered very soon.
Okay, there's one last question, or one more question here from Eve Ferguson. She's asking, will Mantia Diawara's extensive body of films ultimately gain a well-deserved retrospective while he is alive?
Who?
Mantia Diawara.
He wants, Mantia to get the retrospective. Okay, yeah, I know Mantia very well. I will email him. Yeah,
maybe you can do it at City College.
Yes, I will talk, because you say, I'll call him, my big brother. So I will talk to my big brother, and let him know, because I know, this weekend or next weekend, I think he has a a series at the Institute of Africa in the United Arab Emirates. Definitely, I'll talk to Mansia. So he's my big brother.
Okay. Do you have any final words?
My final word.
Yes,
go ahead, Nando. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, the final word is that we hope everybody enjoy this series, and they come and watch it and buy the DVDs that are available, so we can keep on working and bringing important African cinema to the United States. And that's it. What about you, Professor?
Yeah, for me, is that okay? Any initiative or any any initiative that can bring African cinema to more exposure is welcome. And it's true that okay, it's sometimes very difficult to get the information where to start from, to get what film to watch and where to get it. But past that, I think that okay, Africa is producing a diverse and very rich productions that I'll invite everybody to watch it and share those productions, those films with loved ones.
Okay, and well, I want to thank you both for doing this. This was our first live stream event. We have 3 more coming up. One with the director of 2 Weeks in Lagos. Then the next one to talk about Ella Baker, and then the third one with the director of Made in Bangladesh. So this is all coming up this coming week. We also have free screenings of films. We have 14 films total that are available. Some of them are sold out, but most of them are not. And they are available until Thursday. So please share the information. Sign up for the panel discussions. We also put online a very important panel discussion we had a couple of years back called Law, Justice, and Police Brutality, where we had extensive discussions with journalists, activists, police officers, and filmmakers on that topic. And it's now also live on the website. So we have lots of very good information, great films. Please check out Shehu Umar. I'm grateful that you enjoyed the film, and
tremendously.
It is a classic, and we are very proud to be able to show the restored version from the 70s. And thank you all, and we'll be in touch. See you at the next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye. Okay.